Round up! Story junkies across the world, what's good my fellow peasants? How you all doing? So I'm here with another mind-blowing theory. It's been a while. It's time to get deep. It's time to get into it. Engage the tinfoil hats. And well, this isn't so much of a theory, but it's actually some very scary parallels that I have found in Final Fantasy XII to the Bible. Now this isn't something new. Final Fantasy have been doing it all the time, taking hints and references and influence and inspiration from mythologies and religions across the world. It's appeared throughout the series, but this is scary, guys. The parallels are so uncanny that by the end of this video, you're gonna question whether it's all a coincidence or whether Square Enix did in fact retell one of the oldest stories in the Bible. Now, before I begin, I know what some people are gonna say. Does this mean that they just ripped off the Bible and the story isn't as fresh and ingenuitive as I always thought it was? This is definitely going to change your perspective of FF12. I just want to say, because I see it on the internet a lot, rip-off is a really bad term and I hate it, because with almost every great story, be it a book, a movie, a game, it's always taking inspirations and influences from somewhere, and if it's not taking direct inspiration from something, there's always the likelihood you can draw uncanny parallels, because the human species, we are naturally storytelling. We've been telling stories for thousands of years, so I feel like everything's been told at some point. And while I think this could all be a very strong coincidence, it's possible, and it could be because again you could even draw parallels to FF12 and Star Wars, because yeah, there's no denying it, there were some very strong parallels. An evil empire, a charming rogue type sky criminal who has a sidekick who is a non-humanoid, and that all happens to be coincidental, because even the director was asked, did you take Star Wars as an influence? And he said, no, we actually didn't, we didn't even think about it, but now we look back on it, actually yes, we can see, and they actually found it quite amusing. So the point is, there is a line between scarily coincidental parallels and, yep, this was a direct influence and inspiration, and only you can decide which bracket this falls into. But without further ado, let's go! Delving deep into the Bible, deeper than I have ever delved, which was quite strange for me, being as I'm an atheistic, immoral pig. I came across something called the 7th book of the Hebrew and Christian Bible, titled, you ready for it? The Biblical Judges. Now when I say that word in a video that is referencing and in relation to FF12, what jumps out in your head? Of course it is the badass judges, the judge magisters, the military, tyrants or heroes. Which it is down to you and your interpretation of FF12. I always say this even on my streams when people say, oh, Vayne Solidor bad, Ash good, Rabanasta good, Arcadia bad. And whenever someone says that, I tell them they've missed the point of FF12, because one of its strengths, one of its beauties, and what I love most about this game is how it didn't fall into those cliches, good or bad guys. It wasn't as clear cut and 2D as that. In fact, they went to great lengths to go against that, to make each scenario viewable in both a good and bad light. So even Arcadia conquering the Empire of Dalmasca. Now, some of the people say in Rabanasta that they like the takeover. When Vayne Solidor does his speech and they're applauding him, when moments before they were booing him louder than Justin Bieber showing up at a Skrillex concert. The whole thing is about a power struggle where neither is good or bad, and you have to question who the heroes are, or even if there is such a thing as heroes in this game. This is really important, and the reason I bring this up is because this is a huge theme in the Book of Judges in the Bible. And jumping straight in with what is in this chapter, and again listen to the parallels, the Book of Judges is composed of stories from a period of lawlessness and war in Israel's history between the invasion of Canaan and the establishment of a new monarchy. Stopping right there. FF12 is staged during a period of war, and the entire game is about establishing a new monarchy, because Ash and the gang, they're actually trying to establish a new kind of monarchy. But what is even scarier is the definition of judges. The position of a judge in the story isn't as we know it today, someone who passes judgment, someone who upholds the law. In fact, the stories are about exploits of national heroes called judges, most of whom were military leaders and military figures rather than judges in the legal sense of the word. Oh damn! They were leaders. In many versions they were conquerors or freers of oppression. Their word was absolute law, and this position of being a judge in this book was so revered that there was only a select number. Yeah, when the number came through, I nearly shat my pants because there were exactly 7 judges. Or at least 7 were the ones who were considered the main ones whose stories were influential in this story. There were supposedly minor ones throughout the history, and yes, as most of you know, there were 7 judges in Final Fantasy XII. Judge Bergen, Drace, Gabranth, Jis and Zargabath, but one of the ones that are counted as inactive but was still a huge part of the story was Judge Zect. He was sent on a mission to Nabudus to test the Midlight Shard, but for the 7th judge, you can either go with 2, and it just lines up perfectly because one of the judges was called Famran, or as most of us know him, Balthier. He got appointed by his father, Dr. Sid. But you're going to say, oh, Pez, he gave up his role of judge, and indeed he did. That's why the 7th judge is in fact Horson, and he was Lars Solidor's bodyguard. We actually met him at the Garith tribe, or Jahara, I think it was called. So 7 judges in FF12, 7 judges in the Book of Judges. Let's continue, let's dig a bit deeper. The story in the Bible is about the power struggles between the 12 tribes of Israel, and even if we just compare the maps, it's not a far stretch to see that Zebulun and Issachar, which were 2 tribes, the reason why Issachar is highlighted in red is that's where a lot of the fighting happened. It's pretty damn similar to Nelbradia and Dalmasca, kind of that wedge in the middle, and that's why there was a lot of contention in this area. So the story is about this power struggle, but God really plays a big part in this, or they were calling him Yahweh at this point, which in FF12 the parallel is the gods were the Acuria, and it is about the control of God, and the people are unfaithful to Yahweh in this story. If they don't worship him, if they don't submit to his rule and humble themselves before him, then he delivers them into the hands of the enemies, and that's precisely what the Acuria are doing. Final Fantasy and Square Enix, they've always kind of played God and religion off in a bad light, seen the subjugation and worship of a god kind of more as the tyranny and the subjugation of the god itself. You see what I mean? That's really the role the Acuria play, because they were willing to do whatever it took to modify the course of Evilis, and while they kind of worked in the shadows and they didn't actually demand worship, they still demanded to control them, to have mankind live by their standards. And even the ways in which the Acuria got involved were very similar to Yahweh. He would send dreams to the judges and the leaders of Israel. He would even send phantom figures, and that's precisely what the Acuria did. They sent a ghostly image or vision of Rustler to try to manipulate Ash, and they even went one step further, and this is where the fantasy comes in. They sealed away any insubordinate races who refused to accept the Acurian's weave of fate. And that's exactly what happened to certain tribes of Israel. People were unfaithful to Yahweh, and he therefore delivers them into the hands of their enemies. The people repent and entreat Yahweh for mercy, which he sends in the form of a leader or a champion, the judge. The story outline then goes as follows. Israel does evil in the eyes of Yahweh, God. The people were given into the hands of their enemies, which the parallel in FF12 is weirdly Vanar, because Vanar is a god. He is one of the Acuria, and while he's trying to liberate mankind, he's not trying to oppress them. It is actually because of him that Dalmasca / Rabanastor was handed into the hands of Arcadia, because it was Vanar who set Vayne on his entire mission to try to liberate mankind. That's why he invaded. We continue on number 3. Yahweh rises up as a leader. Again, exactly what Vanar was. He rose up pretty much as the leader of Arcadia. He influenced political decisions, military decisions, the whole shebang. The spirit of Yahweh comes upon the leader. You could even see that as the merger of Vanar and Vayne at the end when they merge together. And number 5. The leader manages to defeat the enemy, which to a huge degree Vanar did. Remember, the true enemy in this is the other Acuria. And at the end he actually apologises to Vanar because he believes they have failed, but Vanar tells Vayne that their goals have actually been fulfilled. So the enemy was defeated, the other Acuria. And number 6, peace is then regained, which is the end of Final Fantasy XII. So that's the really rough outline blueprint that even Wikipedia gives for this story. All 6 of these points you could totally flip the interpretation to Ash, and that the spirit of Yahweh coming upon the leader is when she gains the power of the true Dynast King and then liberates her people. I mean, there's really no way, if Square Enix at all have taken any of this influence, or if they have, how they've manipulated and twisted it and changed it. But going back to the judges, they play a role in all of this, as being leaders, again occupying. Even says here, they ask the Lord who should be first to secure the land they are to occupy. But none of this was shown in this great, righteous, spectacular crusade kind of fashion in the Bible, which was really surprising and quite different to read. It was actually shown as being pretty dark and gritty, and it even says, quote, by the end of the Judges, the Israelites are in a worse condition than they were at the beginning, with Yahweh's treasures used to make idolatrous images. The tribe of Dan, which was led by one of the judges, conquering a remote village instead of the Canaanite cities. So this is at the end of the book. One of the final places to be conquered was a remote village, and when I read that, it was FF12, because Mount Beromyces, I hope I'm saying that right, that was that really remote rural mountain village that the judges burned to the ground. And the tribes of Israel were making war on the tribes of Benjamin, brothers fighting each other. When I read that, a chill ran up my spine, because it's two main tribes making war on each other, brothers fighting one another, and that was the most profound theme in Final Fantasy XII, shown through Barsh and Gabranth. Two brothers on either side of the conflict. The real tragedy of Final Fantasy XII was showing war had brought brothers to fighting one another, and to see that as identified as one of the core themes in the Book of Judges. Oh goddamn, if Square Enix did use this, wow, they went so deep. They went balls deep. They went FF15 VR, monsters of the deep. So deep. But continuing on, one of the things I actually saw on the internet when it was talking about Final Fantasy, taking things off the Bible, which previous have done, some have said, well, it can't be because the Bible never features women in powerful, prominent places, and unfortunately they are correct. The women have never had really significant power roles. They've certainly played important roles, don't get me wrong, but nothing like military leaders or military figure. Women were pretty second-class citizen in the Bible, let's be real. Now, I don't think that really matters. I mean, Square Enix could still use influence and then just, stick in female characters if they want. But even with Judge Drace, yes, there was a female judge. And how do we describe Drace when we think of her? Well, she was a pretty strong-minded, badass woman who gave no fucks. And that's the other crazy parallel, is one of the 7 judges in the Bible, in the Book of Judges, was a woman. Yep. Deborah, she was a female judge, and she actually led an army, and it was remarkable for the Bible to do something like this. It even says at the bottom of the Wikipedia page, Judges is a remarkable chapter for the number of female characters who play significant roles, active and passive, in the narratives. Rabbi Joseph Telushkin wrote, it is a rare exception to this tradition that the prophetess and Judge Deborah, perhaps the Bible's greatest woman figure, Deborah stands exclusively on her own merits. Oh my god, that is Drace. I mean, that is literally Drace down to a T. And again, she wasn't the only one. And with Ash, like I said, pretty much being the protagonist of FF12. Damn. Now you might think I'm done. Are you yet sold? If not, I've got some more mind-blowing details. We're not done yet. Some of the other things I want to point out from this story, it was actually one of the first books that contained passages and themes that represented very anti-monarchistic views. Again, a huge theme in FF12, and there was so much dialogue thrown in between anti-monarchistic and monarchistic views. To the point there was even a story in the Book of Judges about somebody called Gideon. And most of the anti-monarchistic theology, it came from this person Gideon actually being begged by the fellow Israelites and his people to lead them. They were begging him to be like a king, but he actually refused. The point being is that Ash goes through this same kind of questioning, this same kind of decision making. What cost does her throne come back at? And there's times where she gets tempted by revenge, or she gets tempted by the power of things like the Sun Crest or the Dawn Shard, and it gets to the point where her drive to reclaim her throne almost blinds her. And just going back to talking about the Sun Crest and the Dawn Shard, the two temptations of power. So one of those was a piece of nethicite gifted from the Akura themselves, gifted by the gods. And the Sun Crest was a great source of power in the world of Evilis, a gift from the gods also. The whole thing of Ash going down a dark path was emitted from Ondor's diaries. He never says that. Like, Ondor is the narrator for FF12, and because he's Ash's uncle, he tells the good version of the story. He never narrates anything about Ash and some of the darker motivations and the darker desires that she has in the game, and that kind of emitting from the story is exactly what happens in the Book of Judges, because it actually says the Book of Judges is as intriguing for the themes it leaves out as for the ones it includes. The Ark of the Covenant, for example, which is given so much importance in other stories, is almost entirely missing. So the Ark of the Covenant played a huge role in the 12 tribes of Israel's story, but most of the darker side of the story was omitted from it. And I don't know if there's a parallel between Ondor omitting a lot of that darker stuff. And when I read what it was, it is a gold covered wooden chest described as containing 2 stone tablets of the 10 Commandments, the thing gifted from God himself. Just like the Akira, they gift 2 stones in this, and those tablets are actually seen in the Bible as being infused with real power. And with that power, they could defeat their enemies and fight the other tribes of Israel. The Ark also contained something called the Aaron's Rod. Instant thing that popped in my head was Sword of the Kings, because what goes along with the Suncrist and the Dawn Shard, it is the Sword of the Kings. So before I even researched what I was looking for, I guarantee some parallels to the Sword of the Kings comes up, and I'm not joking, it appeared. So this rod is probably the most powerful artifact in the entire Bible. It's the rod that Moses actually used to part the Red Sea. But you know what the Bible's like, it always likes to go one step further. They also try to say this particular rod was even used by Adam. It also was what David slew Goliath with in one version, and all of his descendants used it, and not even that Joseph. And Joseph had the fucking Technicolor Dreamcoat. Yeah, even he had gone it for a while. So this rod, considering David and all of his descendants and all of these prominent figures used it, well, most of these people, they were kings. So it's exactly like the Sword of the Kings, and the story even gets more bizarre when it says that the supposed fact of the supernatural origin of the rod is explained in the New Testament when it says that Aaron's rod was preserved in the Ark by King Josiah, who foresaw the impending national catastrophe and concealed the Ark and its contents. It could literally be describing King Wraithwall at that point, because he hid the Sword of the Kings, he even hid the Suncrist, sealed it all away. Oh, good googly moogly. I'm done. I'm out. I think that's it. I don't think I've got anything else for you. Well, I do. I'll just say, guys, I've not even gone into all the reading. I've not even gone all the depth. I'm sure if I even continue going further, but trying to keep this video down, trying to keep it short, there it is. Just some crazy, crazy parallels. Could it be intentional? Could it not? Just to show you how easily coincidences can happen before I leave. Also in this arc, there was also one other item. A pot of manna. That's right, a pot of manna. Sometimes archaically spelled with just a M-A-N-A. Exactly how we know manna in Final Fantasy. You know, we drink the pots and it restores our MP, and we could do some more magic. Well, the pot of manna, the only other thing that was in this arc, and it was an edible substance, which according to the Bible and the Quran, God provided for the Israelites during their travel in the desert. Some accounts even say that this edible substance was magical. And what's even funny is the Israelites, they travelled 40 years through the desert, a crazy long period of time. And what happens in FF12? Yep, the Sand Sea. Is there any coincidence that in this whole story that draws parallels to the 12 tribes of Israel, that there's a part in the game where you go through an insanely long desert? I mean, seriously, the Sand Sea is one of the biggest regions in any Final Fantasy. Square Enix made it astronomically big. Could it possibly have been a reflection of the 40 years that the Israelites travelled during their journeys to try to reclaim their homeland? Possible, but the reason I say this could be a coincidence is because also the word manna is a word found in Austronesian language. So I think that's Australian, is it? And that actually means power, effectiveness, and prestige. And that where in most cases the power is understood to be supernatural. So that's actually where most people believe the word manna comes from for Square Enix, Final Fantasy. So again, I don't know, I'm just throwing it out there at this point. I'm just goddamn throwing facts at you. I'm just going to throw another random one at you. The Curia were originally designed as mind flayers who in earlier concepts of the FF12 Ultramania were draped in luxurious robes and turbans, and they were depicted as lounging in a bar, smoking pipe. I'm not kidding you, that was their original idea. But there it is, that's all I've got for you. Are you convinced? Are you sold? Do you think there's anything in this? I'm going to dig deeper. If you want to see another video on this in the future, let me know. I've got some other fantastic theories, and I've so enjoyed doing this that I've decided, like I said in one of my previous videos, this is what I'm going to get back to doing these kind of videos. Going hard on the story, going ham, and getting that tinfoil hat nice and toasty. Love FF12, love its story, love its themes, and absolutely loving the remaster. The live streams have been great, guys, but I'll see you over there, and I'll see you on the next video. Goodbye!